Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back after the first game of the season for our first match review. A disappointing 1-0 loss to Man United. Not the way you'd want to start the season, but not something was unexpected, I'd say. Here to talk it all through, we've got Skibby. How are we going today?
Hello, welcome. Well, welcome. I'm welcoming to be back, I would say. But yeah, wish it was on better pretenses, but here we are. And just a very quick one. I forgot to do this on my first one back in the summer, but hi Alex, if you're watching, and from Download Festival, some guy randomly stopped me and said if I can give him a shout out. So sorry, I forgot on the first one back. I'm
You got
glad to
it
be
out
here.
there in the end. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Cheers, Skib. And Dad, how are we going tonight?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Good to be here. I mean, not the best result, but I'm glad we're back and up and running. And yeah, we would have been nice to get some points, but I'm not absolutely gutted by what I saw.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one coming into the start of the season. Obviously, big changes since last season when you look at players we've lost like Tosin, Willian, Polina, Bobby Decordova, Reed. There's a lot of names out of that starting lineup who, might have made a slight difference on the weekend, but really we can't be overly disappointed with going down to a team who are going to be chasing Champions League football. Even though they've got some injury problems, it did seem like an opportunity to potentially cause an upset. But I don't think we can really walk away from the game going, well, like I've seen some people on Twitter saying, "Oh, relegation on the cards now. I can't believe we're ever thinking about anything more than the lower end of mid-table." Um, Before we do crack into the actual discussion itself, just a reminder to everyone about the Fulham Discord. You can find the link in our Twitter bio. You can find it on our website as well. A really great place with lots of really good content going on at the moment. Lots of really good conversations between some great people. Like I said previously, Cottage Tactico, Fulham Fan News are huge users on the Discord, and I feel we get a lot more from there than we do on Twitter, which is great. It's a real great insight and a great place to be. So do make sure you join up to the Discord. We've also launched www.cravenpod.com, a great place to get up-to-date articles. You'll also see the midweek moments, which we post every Wednesday, which is a wrap-up of Fulham during the week. So please do check out the website, check out some of the articles being written on there. Um, Guys, let's get into the game itself. Skibby, I'll throw to you first. Just your overall thoughts going into this game on how you thought, because you weren't in our preview pod, obviously. How did you feel we were going to
No,
tackle Man United in this game?
it was always going to be a tough ask, I think. It's yes. Oh gosh. There you go. Almost fell off my chair, literally. But yeah, I think it's you lose that physicality with Polina. We haven't recruited as of yet to sort of fill that gap. Therefore, it means that it was a complete change of approach to a Fulham that we hadn't really seen before, which was potentially trying to pick up the ball from the centre backs, work the way through the middle, and then find the outlet on the wings, which it's new to us as fans. It's new to the players, so it was whether how they could hit the ground running with it. But then obviously Man United had some injuries, like Maguire wasn't 100%. There was no Hoyland, so they didn't have an outlet. They were going into the game with a false nine, which they used against Man City in the Community Shield. So it was the balance of head over heart for me going into that game was Man United aren't the strongest. They even had their struggles last year when they were. Um, but therefore, what kind of Fulham turns out? We had a very successful pre-season. Yes, we lost to Sevilla, but we had a lot of good results, a lot of good play from what I saw. And I think there was a lot of positives going in that, potentially with the absence of Willian, that Adama had stepped up. Welby looked like he'd stepped up. Everyone just seemed to sort of raise their game, not relying on the sort of the big names that we had. So going into the game, I was kind of head saying draw, but heart saying that Fulham could win this game. And it's not very often that you get a chance to go to Old Trafford with that feeling of optimism that you could come away with some points here. where in previous seasons you kind of just write off Old Trafford as a loss when you look at the fixture list. And to be honest, I still think that's pretty accurate from my feeling anyway, going into this game, which is it's almost a free hit. Opening game of the season, we've got a lot of changes. We don't expect anything at Old Trafford. No one ever does. But you could have a chance.
Yeah, and I think that's always the way when you do take on a team like Man United and any of those teams in the top six. It is a bit of a free hit. We're never really expecting to take anything from the game, but you know, we did push Man United all the way to the end. They scored in the 87th minute. I don't think we looked overly pushed throughout the majority of the game. Admittedly, there were a handful of chances. You can sort of write off that Garnacho miss at the very end of the game as the kind of thing that happens in the 92nd minute. But apart from that, I think Fulham actually dealt with Man United really well. It was a well taken goal in the end, but really, apart from that, you could probably say that it was fairly even, and a draw may have been a fair result. Um, Talking about sort of pre-game stuff here, Dad, we tried to predict the starting lineup, and I think it's probably the first time, maybe ever, that we've got 11 from 11. Pretty. I guess we sort of could see the writing on the wall based on the pre-season and how we saw the team line up. Were there any surprises there for you, or do you think our prediction was pretty bang on for that exact reason?
Well, we had a bit of a cheat given Hoffenheim being so close in the last game of pre-season. I think pretty much told us what how it was going to sort of settle, um, regardless of whether we signed more players in that last week. But for me, I think it was really the what's the right word I'm looking for here? Everything we've been talking about that is a work in progress and that must be, um, uh, kind of a few little problem areas that we've still trying to resolve, um, was on display for me. I think the fact that uh, I don't want to get into this too much, but Mooney's obviously didn't score in preseason. Correction, he did score behind closed doors, but in the big games, um, he was a little bit MIA. Uh, Midfield, we just looked a little bit insipid for most of the time. There wasn't any real bite or any real control. We clearly came under pressure um, when Man United really pressed us in the last line of defence, which Cottage Tactico's discussed and laid out really quite brilliantly, like he always does. Check out the Discord, and you'll see all his articles there. So for me, I actually wasn't that surprised. I was hopeful that we might nick a point or maybe more, but I wasn't really that surprised at how it all unfolded because it's about par for where I think we actually are.
Yeah, I think you're right. We admittedly didn't have any injuries, which always is a bit of an issue. And Man United did have quite a lot of injuries, so they had to make a lot of changes. But as we saw in pre-season, we're sort of warming to our current way of playing. We're sort of warming to the way that Marco wants the team to set up. And there are quite a lot of changes when you look at someone like Adama playing on the wing, who wasn't playing last season. I don't think he started a game last season. I think he came off the bench in every single appearance. So to have someone like Adama starting, to have ESR, who's obviously not fully fit, starting centrally, Pereira playing out of position slightly, playing deeper. Um, Kenny Tete and Castagna are probably both still sort of fighting out for that position. Um, it does feel like the team's not being thrown together as such, but maybe just, a week or so early for the season to be starting. And maybe that's because we actually didn't start our preseason until quite late in comparison to some of the other teams. So, look, it's probably, I wouldn't call it an unfair result. It's an expected loss, but I don't think we should be too disheartened by it. Skibby, I'll throw it to you on this one. Sasa Lukic was sort of trying to fill the void that Polinia's left. How do you think he played against Man United?
I think he played quite well. And, you know, I think it's very public knowledge that I'm not his biggest fan. But do you know what? I think I'm starting, and it was something that I was saying last season, which was when you put him with Polinia, he kind of gets lost. And for the reason that is because Polinia just is a monster, just goes out and does his own thing, crunching tackles, and just tries to be everywhere. And I think with Lukic, Reed, Kearney, we were really struggling to find that partner for Polinia because he just dwarfs the other partner, basically. And then I think when we saw Lukic play well last year was when Polinia was banned, when he was sort of with Reed at Old Trafford. I believe he did start with Polinia in the Tottenham game, but you know that was a bit of a stranger one, I think, in terms of the performance all round. But I think Lukic had a really sort of solid game. I think he had enough touches of the ball. He was physical. His passing was accurate. I think he just did a job of not so much being the brutish defensive centre mid, but almost just that physical presence in front of the back four, protecting them, which I think he did really well. And I think changing the balance with Pereira next to him meant that he would have to do a bit more of the defensive sort of abilities, which I don't think he looked out of place. And I think what we need to sort of bring into perspective here is a Lukic and Pereira pairing was completely brand new for Fulham. To put them in a game where they would have to deal with Bruno Fernandes, Casemiro with his physicality, I think Mason Mount as well. There was a big ask for both of them. And to be honest, I don't think that they did badly at all. I don't think it's the way that we should go forward. I know that it's very public knowledge that we're getting a new centre defensive mid. Marco said so before the game. But I think for the circumstances for the game, I think that Lukic and Pereira actually did quite a decent job. And I think against any other team, potentially with Leicester coming up at the weekend, I think it could have the possibility of working against the teams where you're going to have more possession. But I do feel that as the game went on, especially that first half, where as soon as Casemiro was sort of growing in confidence, his physicality just came through. I think he had about 4 shots in about 5 minutes, headers, long range shots.
Yeah.
We just couldn't get anywhere near him. But I do think that he didn't put a bad foot wrong, Lukic. Same with Pereira. But I just can't see it being the pairing going forward based on that performance, as well as the common knowledge that we're in the market for a defensive mid.
Yeah, look, I think
you sort of. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Jack. No, I think we're maybe a little bit in the mode of talking about Sasa Lukic as we did last season, always trying to find a player, a Premier League player there, and sort of being quite disappointed, generally speaking, because we're always comparing him to Polinia or how he partners with Polinia. And I think you're absolutely right, Skippy, that he just didn't really work very well with Polinia at all. The problem I've got, and I suppose there's no point going on about it too much because the football club has publicly said we're going to get another defensive midfielder. We're just hoping for the very best because what we've got in defensive midfield at the moment is absolutely fine, but it doesn't. It's not going to be competitive against the likes of Casemiro, Mainu, and throw what's his face Fernandez into that mix. And so I don't think we can be overly critical of what they did. They just weren't commanding, couldn't get a hold of the game, couldn't control the game for us. And that was a problem. I think it was a problem for ESR as well, because I think he had to go. Yeah. He had to go looking for the ball more than he possibly should when Pereira's already playing deep. Pereira was quiet. I didn't think he had an amazing game alongside Lukic. Lukic was actually a standout. He did a better job in defensive midfield than Pereira did. So yeah, but again, I can imagine Marco is just trying to see out the next couple of weeks with an absolute minimum amount of points damage until he gets his preferred squad in place. It's make do in the midfield at the moment, isn't it?
Mm.
And I think, as Skibby said, it's obvious that we're bringing in someone. Marco said as much post match that we will have another defensive mid in there. So realistically, Sasa Lukic is not going to be playing that role for too much longer, you'd assume. I thought he was actually far more progressive than I've seen him play previously, and actually looked like he had a pretty good game in general. I don't think any Fulham
Sure.
player really had a bad game, to be perfectly honest, which is a nice thing to be able to say. Speaking of, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but Rodrigo Muniz, there's been a lot of questions in pre-season. Is he the man to sort of fill that number 9 role going forward? How did you think Muniz played, Skibby?
I thought he was really good, personally. I thought it was a tough game where clearly our build-up play was struggling. In the early sort of minutes, we found a lot of outlet from Traore, but I think they must have made some changes and squandered that pretty quickly. But I think Muniz was feeding off scraps. He was having a really tough battle. Lisandro Martinez and Maguire are not easy defenders to play against. Maguire, just a physicality. I mean, if you're in an aerial duel with Maguire, you're going to come off second best 90% of the time. But no, I think he held his own. I think there was one really key moment in the game, and for me, came from Muniz, and it was around the Pereira and Iwobi sort of 2-on-1 with Maguire. But when you sort of rolled it back a little bit before he messes up the pass, it's Muniz fighting for scraps, nips in front of the player. I think he gets fouled, and the ball sort of breaks for Pereira. And that is the stuff which I think is probably often forgotten about, especially when you're thinking about, shots on target, goals, assists, things that, really matter in most people's eyes. But you don't really get the stats on sort of the nitty gritty, fighting for the ball, just playing the passing out and holding up the ball. And I don't think it was an easy game for him. It wasn't an easy game for anyone. I mean, you saw Emil Smith-Rowe having to pull back deep just to sort of pick up the ball. Muniz, unfortunately, doesn't really have that luxury being the striker and needs to be on the halfway line, if not more progressive into their half. But I think he is still the number 9 for me. We just need to bring players around him that he can sort of lay the ball off to and to sort of bring us up the pitch. And I think it'll take time. He's been used to playing with Pereira behind him and Willian to sort of off to the left. So I think it may change for him that, he's got to get used to Smith Rowe. He's got to get used to Iwobi on the left, which when we've seen that in the past, we've always just opted to say, right, put Iwobi on the right and have Willian on the left. And I don't think that was more down to Willian's effectiveness on the left. I just don't think Iwobi, for me, is providing what we normally would see on our build-up on the left. And I did think that we saw that kind of breakdown. But I think Muniz, for me, it's still got to take some transition, as well as the whole squad. But he will push on and be our number 9. I have no doubt about that, because I saw some glimpses against Man United, which made me really happy with his performance.
Dad?
Oh, look, a lot of people were getting stuck into him and, asking questions, not quite getting the hatchet out, but, geez, I don't know what kind of world they live in, They are not very resilient, and I think they're looking for very unrealistic kind of KPIs on the guy. Just because he hasn't scored in his first game doesn't mean a lot. He's done enough. Let's be honest here. He's actually done enough to prove that was not a purple patch. That was actually a period of consistent goal scoring in the Premier League. So I think the question is really over as to whether he can do it or not. He absolutely can. There's been a lot of changes. Take Willian out of it, take Pereira sitting in behind him out of it. Um, Sadly for me, I think he's never going to get great service from the wings overlapping and and knocking balls in. We're just not that good at it. Until we upgrade our wingers, I just don't believe that he's going to get easy service and reliable service to dink it in or you know put dive into the box with a header and put it away. It's just not going to be like that. He's going to have to find ways, and I totally back the guy to find other ways of scoring goals. I think he's a smart lad. I think he's quite adaptable. He's a good footballer. He's not just a brick up top. He's a good footballer. And in as much as the midfield are trying to find their feet, uh, he's got to be given time to do that as well. And it'll change again over the next couple of weeks before we really know where we are. Imagine ESR being really confident about the setup behind him, so he doesn't have to drop deep. He's playing in there, doing some intricate stuff with Mooney's. I can see that unfolding. I'm 100% behind him.
Well, I think as
Yeah, and
well,
just to
if
quickly
we,
add to that, Jack, if you don't mind,
yeah, go.
he makes something out of nothing by himself. We saw him
100%.
another overhead kick out of nothing, and the fact, I would say there's not many strikers in the Premier League who can do that by themselves and just fight, scrap, and get a shot off. And that is an absolute trait to have that you want, especially in our position for a number 9 in the Premier League.
100% agree. And I was going to say something along the same lines where you look at something like that overhead kick where he can just create something out of nothing. And there was another chance as well where the ball sort of fell in the box to him and he was basically having to be fought off by 3 Man United defenders who Harry Maguire basically stood in front of him. And I think Martinez and someone else were just all over him, trying to keep him away from the ball. And against a team like Man United, they can keep him out. But I feel like against some of the other teams in the league who maybe don't have the strongest centre backs or defensive partnerships, he's going to cause some problems. We saw it at the end of last season. I think we're going to see more of that this year. And I don't think we can fairly judge him against Man United. I think there's a long way to go for Muniz, but I was impressed, like you said, with some of the stuff that I've seen from him so far. And we talk about some of the new signings potentially coming in. People like Andre, who's obviously his passing is brilliant. Joachim Anderson, who is great with the long balls over the top. Potentially finding some other sort of players on the wings, players sitting a little bit deeper who can provide that better service. I think there's a lot still to be built around Muniz, and I think if we can just keep the confidence up in him, and I think he's got the confidence. You see that in the way that he plays. I think we should be able to get another top season out of him, and hopefully 15 goals, maybe even more than that. Just need to work on the service because, like Black, White, and Fred said in our live chat here on YouTube, don't think we gave Muniz a single good cross, and I agree with that. There wasn't much service into him throughout the whole game. And hopefully we can work on that. And I'm sure that's something that Marco will be working on the training ground as well. Guys, talking about the chances in the game, Skibby, do you want to talk about the cutback that, like we've said a few times, has been left out of most highlights packages, but some good work down the wings from Fulham early on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really early doors, Tete and Adama Traore just had Dallo on toast. He was just not comfortable. Lisandro Martinez was having to come over and try and help out, and then even he got roasted. And I really thought that should have been 1-0. I don't think I could discredit Traore too much because of the work we did beforehand, but I do think that the ball in could have been a bit better. And I guess it comes down to that point of, you know, getting to know your teammates, because when you look at the positioning, I think Iwobi goes to the front post, and then Emil Smith Rowe and Muniz have made the same run. So they're literally standing on each other's toes, which is just one of those things. But not going to take it away from the defence. The new right back, I'm going to butcher his name, but Mazaroy, something like that, gets a foot in, very crucial. Great defending, to be honest. But that for me filled me with confidence. The way that Adama just breezed past Dallo, I thought, you know what, he's in for a really real long night. But unfortunately, I don't think we then utilised it. It got to a
Mm.
point where, for me, Traore was cutting inside and he was doing too much and getting caught out and losing the ball. And I was just thinking, right, please just use Pereira, use Lukic, just get the ball away from your area, and then we can bring it back and get you in behind. And it just seems that that build-up passage just didn't happen after that initial breakaway. So whether Ten Hag was clever enough to realise that, you know, everything that, well, our main threat was Traore. Therefore, if you crowd out the right side of the pitch and block those passing channels, then he can't get in behind. And that's exactly what I saw. Which, you know, it's a shame from their point of view that, you know, that they're actually switched on, and that's why they get paid the big bucks, I suppose. But it's just a shame it was something that we didn't utilize after that moment. But it gave us huge confidence. But it's just a shame that we didn't manage to utilize it any further, like I said.
Yeah, agree. And Dad, a little bit later in the half as well, a great effort by Kenny Tete, who carried the ball all the way up the pitch and just had an opening to have a pop shot. And geez, it looked like it was going in for a second there. Anana made a very good save.
Yeah, unlucky. It was going in. I thought we were pretty bright early on. I thought we started really, really well. That filled me with a lot of confidence because I think we're a slow starter at the beginning of seasons in general, with the one exclusion of that time we started against Liverpool at home, where we actually jumped out of the blocks and it was like, wow, what's going on here? Um, but yeah, look, I thought Kenny Tete had a really good game, and I'm a fan of Kenny Tete. I love his energy. Um, but I do understand overall, in terms of a system, the problems we've actually got at the back there. It's not, it's not complete. It's not balanced, and it certainly led to some problems as the game progressed. And Man United kind of worked it out.
Yeah, agree. It felt like Fulham actually started the game really well, but maybe it's down to Ten Hag, maybe it's down to, I guess, the quality in Man United's side. But they seemed to grow into the game after Fulham almost shocked them at the very start. And um, it seemed like the game sort of swung fairly early doors when there was a bit of an error from Bernd Leno, who tried to play the ball out to Sasa Lukic, misplaced his pass, and fortunately made up for it with a brilliant save, one of, I think, three for the game. But this one from Bruno Fernandes, who really should have done better. Post game, Bernd Leno named man of the match. Skibby, do you think that's a fair man of the match award for Bernd Leno?
I'm going to be controversial. No, the only reason he was man of the match because he made some crucial saves, but a couple of them were off his own doing. So, um, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I think for me, Tete was the most consistent. I don't
Mm.
think he really put a foot wrong. But yeah, the Leno pass for the moment you're talking about wasn't even a misplaced pass. It was a total scuff, completely terrible. And I think there was a couple of times where I felt that he put us under unnecessary pressure. I know we're supposed to play a certain way, and I know that we're supposed to, you know, possession based out of the back. But I think there's a point where you need to make a decision, and if we've got this really high press for Man United, then surely a ball over the top, give Muniz something to fight for because that's what he does. I don't think we saw that enough. But don't get me wrong, I think it could have been 3 or 4-0 without Leno in goal. Very
Mm.
crucial saves. But I do feel that a couple of them were his own doing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Fractionally
don't think
harsh,
it's man of the
Skip.
match, but there you
Fractionally
go.
harsh. Yeah. I that to me was just a really poor decision under a lot of pressure. But we were getting really pressurized, and he literally tried to play a 1-2. I mean, he probably had a moment to control that, and he smashed it back out at in the direction of Lukic, who it would have been. I mean, it was just a wrong decision, and I think Silva did make some comments about the fact that we just we lacked a bit of composure at the back. And I think, as I said before, Cottage Tactico has done some pretty good analysis on this. It was more than a lack of composure. We actually had some weaknesses which they exploited, and they were their press was very good, and we struggled with it.
Yeah, look, I don't think Leno was actually under that much pressure when he made that error. He could have easily taken a touch and cleared the ball upfield. It's obviously just the way that we've been asked to play, which is to play out from the back. The problem we have, and we'll get onto it, and one of the questions we've got is Fulham's back four at the moment aren't known for their intricate passing and their ball playing ability. Um, so it is a bit of a worry that we're being asked to play out of the back when maybe the players that we have aren't the best at playing out from the back. If you look at potential backline of having someone like Joachim Anderson and maybe Cuenca, and that I know that would mean dropping Bassi, and I think we're all on board with dropping Diop for an upgrade. But if you look at that, and all of a sudden you've got two centre backs who are incredibly good with the ball at their feet from what we've seen so far and what we know of having had Anderson at Fulham previously, all of a sudden there, and add Andre on top of that, potentially sitting in front of them and dropping in between the two centre backs, all of a sudden you can play out of the back a little bit more comfortably. And I think maybe it seems like Marco's almost preparing the rest of the team for us to be playing in that way, despite not having the players for it at the moment.
Mm.
And that will lead to errors, unfortunately. And I'm hopeful that we just bring in those players to be able to play in that style, because I'm not overly confident seeing players like Diop with the ball at his feet. Bassi's not bad, but not great with the ball at his feet. And look, Robinson and Tete, their strengths are not ball playing. Their strengths are with Robinson, it's his athleticism up the wing and breaking forward, and with Tete, it's his one-on-one defending. They're not really selected to play the ball, so there's a lot of work to be done there, and I think those errors are maybe fractionally worrying for me if we continue to try and play in that fashion, because I don't think we've got the team to currently do that. So I'd actually like in the next game, if we're going with the same lineup, to see Leno, maybe if we're being pressed hard, just boot that one upfield. And Muniz is very good in the air; he's very strong. We do have that option and that ability to get out of those situations by just lumping the ball forward, and it's almost a bit of a 50-50 with Muniz up top. So we shouldn't be putting ourselves in those situations. And I agree with you in a way, Skibby. I don't think Leno. Well, I think Leno had a very good game, but like you said, I think some of those saves were sort of brought on by errors that he potentially made, and that forced him to make those saves. So I also agree. Kenny Tete, I think, was probably my man of the match. I think, like you said, he was very consistent and did what he was asked to very well. Robinson, I think, also had a pretty good game, but there's a bit of work to be done still, and obviously there's a bit of recruitment to be done, which we will touch on a little bit later. Look, not a huge number of chances on top of that. We've spoken about the saves that Leno made. Fulham didn't really threaten too much, apart from some sort of speculative overhead kicks. But the goal came sort of late on. Dad, I'll throw to you first. Do you think there's anything more Fulham potentially could have done here? The ball sort of works its way out wide, gets crossed in. Xerxes sort of nips in front of McTominay, who was there ready to strike the ball as well, and it dribbles into the back of the net agonisingly. Could Fulham have done better?
Fulham could have done a little bit better in midfield when Tom Kearney got past, but once that move was on, they did it very well. They executed very well. I don't think we could have done that much better at the end of the day. We just got played on the left. Kearney could have done better. I think that's really the honest truth. Jack, you're on mute.
No,
Yeah,
you're not
sorry.
wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
Kenny just got absolutely floored, and you just think, and then he's trying to jog back, and it's very. I mean, okay, he's never been the quickest. I'm sorry, Tom, but you're getting on a bit. But he's quite sluggish as he's sort of jogging back, and it's not really a gut buster, is it? It's just an ugly goal. Everything about it could have been avoided, I think. Just, basic pass, hit and hope cross almost in the right area. If McTominay had scored it, I probably wouldn't have forgiven him if he did eventually join us, but hey ho, unless he scored about 6 or 7. But, trickles in, flashbacks to kind of not a game of sort of equal feeling in terms of reward, but it flashed back to the Europa League final where Diego Forlan just sort of shinned it and it rolls underneath Schwarzer. It had a very similar feeling. And then in a pub full of Manchester United fans, uproar. I'm just sitting there like, shit. Yeah, it wasn't. It was an ugly goal. It's one of those which you see week in, week out, but it's just a dagger to the heart, isn't it? Especially the time of the goal. It's just like I think back to Crystal Palace at the end of last season at home, like punching absolutely Schlupp hammers it top corner, no chance, and you go, hold your hands up, fair enough. But this one, it was sort of almost like, could do better there, Kenny. All right, could do better there. Where's Lukic? Where's Pereira? Oh, so Pereira wasn't on the pitch, but where was the central midfield in front of the back four? Goes out left or our left. Can we stop that cross coming in? It's just a bit too bitty, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And like you said, being so late in the game, and interestingly, Steve Reynolds on our live stream mentioning in 4 of the last 5 games we've conceded in the last 5 minutes. And it does feel like something that continues to happen and is becoming quite Fulhamish now. The fact that we just can't help but close games out. And it's like you say, a professional foul there from Tom Kearney. Just pull him down. Don't let him get into a position where a chance can be created out wide. Maybe you don't want to foul, but maybe we should be throwing ourselves at that ball a little more and tracking runs a little bit more carefully. And you could put it down to maybe some early season unpreparedness, but it does feel like we probably could have done a little better just in general, not in terms of the actual finish itself or trying to keep the ball out of the net, but the build-up play, just some smarts more than anything. It seems to be slightly lacking. And look, disappointing to go down 1-0. Like we've said a couple of times, it's not unexpected, but it feels like a draw against Man United at Old Trafford to start the season off would just have been a brilliant way to actually start the season. But look, we move on. Let's have a look at some of the key stats from the game. Possession-wise, Man United with 55% to Fulham's 45%. 14 shots for United to 10 for Fulham, with 5 for United on target, 2 for Fulham on target. 482 passes for Man United to Fulham's 384. Fulham had more corners with 8 to United's 7, and Fulham had less fouls with just the 10 to United's 12. A disappointing loss in the fact that we've lost the game, but the performance itself, not terrible. Looking at the table quickly, Fulham sitting in 16th doesn't really mean anything at the start of the season, especially as we're recording this with 6 teams yet to play. But look, at least we're not Everton conceding 3 on the opening day, or Wolves and Ipswich also conceding multiple times. And with a couple of games coming up that are winnable games, I think it is something we should be looking at, is moving up the table slowly but surely. Talking about the upcoming game, we play Leicester City at home on Saturday, first game of the season at Craven Cottage. Skibby, we'll obviously cover this one during the week, but give me your thoughts on Leicester. They haven't actually played yet this season, so we haven't seen what they're going to be like. I think they play tonight. How are we feeling going into this one, just having seen Leicester's moves in the summer, though?
I mean, first and foremost, personally, I'm excited because I get to go. I'm going home. Got my digital ticket ready. See how much of an absolute shit show that's going to be getting through the turnstile. But no, it'll be good. Leicester are going to be a funny one. I want to write them off the same way that I wrote off Luton last year, but Luton actually surprised me. I think Leicester have lost their manager, went to Chelsea. They lost Drewsbury Hall to Chelsea. They've made some moves. I'm not sure, nothing really groundbreaking, but they've got to spend because they've got to create that gap between the gulf of Championship and Premier League, which we know all too well. So I think I want to write them off, but I think for them, and we haven't seen them yet this year, so we'll see what happens. But I think for them, they're going to start looking at Fulham as their sort of first winnable game. I believe they've got Spurs on Monday. So yeah, I think on paper, this is 100% that we need to be winning. Comfortable from home. We should be comfortable in possession. Hopefully, we have a new recruit that can step in either in midfield or in defence. But yeah, I mean, Leicester have got early days, and this is what I've been sort of telling a few of my friends. Like Ipswich held their own against Liverpool for the first half. You're going to be full of confidence. You're going to be sort of thinking, this is the Premier League. We've got to step up. You're going to be sort of taking it as it comes. But it's when those results start going against you that you start to lose confidence and you just don't have that momentum. And I think Leicester are going to be, I believe, home to Tottenham. So they're going to be well up for that, sky high, ready in the Premier League. Then if that doesn't go their way, then they're going to come to us and you're going to think this is probably more of one of our winnable games. Probably a worse time to play Leicester, if I'm honest. But we will see. And yeah, Fred's quite right. Bloody VDR. He always turns up with a goal, doesn't he? So
yeah, and look, he's likely to get a start. I would have thought some Premier League experience for Leicester. An interesting thing, I've just seen Leicester have a bit of team news already, and Patson Daka, Jamie Vardy, and Connor Cody are missing for the Monday night game, and most of them, all of them, in fact, will likely be missing for weeks, if not months, apparently, according to Steve Cooper. So a couple of attacking threats there taken out of Leicester's lineup, which will definitely work in our favour when we come up against them. Dad, let's say Leicester do lose to Spurs, which you kind of expect. Do you think having a sort of wounded opposition coming to you, looking to get points on the board, and as we sort of said when we caught up earlier today, it feels like the newly promoted teams, they have to get points against teams like Fulham. Do you think Leicester will be looking at Fulham early doors saying this needs to be 3 points for us, and therefore is a game that we should actually be a little more wary of?
Yes and yes. Look, I think I go back to the conversation we were having a little earlier about some of our, I wouldn't call them major problems, but some of our imperfections and our less than perfects in the story of our defence at the moment. Particularly, not on paper. These are perfectly good Premier League defenders, but if you actually overlay that with the way Marcus Silva absolutely wants to play and is almost regardless of personnel in place, just fully committed to playing like that. I think if we don't adapt before we, the recruitments arrive or the cavalry arrives, if you like, in terms of the best possible personnel in those positions, I think we're a bit vulnerable. And so over the next 3 or 4 weeks, while we play, newly promoted teams and what we would regard as easy beats, without being disrespectful, the one simple thing that they can do to us to really, really cause us a lot of trouble is to press us very, very hard for the first 20 minutes. Because if we're not in our game and we don't adapt to that and we keep trying to play out of the back and they actually force us to play out of out from our weaker players at the back, there's an error there which could be really, really costly. So that kind of is of some concern to me over the next couple of weeks until the window closes, and hopefully we have a bit of success in bringing a couple of good players in. Even then, it's not going to be an instant fix. But I mean, if you do bring in a ball playing centre back, the one thing he can do from day one, he may struggle with the system or being entirely comfortable, but the one thing he will be able to do is play under pressure with the ball at his feet. So he's not going to get caught, because that's a natural skill that he's going to have that hopefully we're recruiting for. So you're instantly in a better position. And then, like we were saying before, Leno's got to take charge of that situation, read the game, see what's happening, and just make some very simple binary decisions. No, we're going long, even if it's not very pretty. We go long.
Yeah. And look, news is that the Khans are actually in town this week. So that usually means signings galore. As Marco said in his post match, we're still looking at 3 or 4 players to sign. It seems pretty clear that it's going to be a centre back with bids accepted for Joe Gomez already and bids in with Diego Carlos and Joachim Anderson. Likely a defensive midfielder. Hopefully that turns out to be Andre, but if not, we've got links with McTominay as well. And you'd expect someone to replace Willian, who obviously announced this week that he had officially left Fulham, even though that was the worst kept secret ever. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of work to still be done. And I think if we can do some of that in this week, we might see someone jump in for the Leicester game. I'd say someone like Anderson would be able to slot straight into the back line, I would have thought. And that's a big upgrade for us if we can get Anderson over Diop. I think that strengthens the back line completely. I doubt if Andre did sign that we'd see him start straight away. But at least having someone like that on the bench who can come on and make an impact would definitely be helpful. So there's a lot of work to still be done, but I think a lot of that's going to be done in the next week or so, hopefully. Guys, before we wrap up, we do have a bunch of questions that were sent in by our listeners. Start with this one. We sort of already covered it a little bit. I guess pretty simple one-word answers from everyone for this one, really. Dad, can Muniz be our number 9 all season?
Yes.
Skibby, I'll reframe it slightly. Do you think there's the possibility of Fulham looking to sign another striker, or do you think we're pretty happy with Muniz with Jimenez sitting behind him?
I think we're going to sign another striker, personally.
Mm.
And if you're in the Discord, you know that we've had some potential conversations around Calvert-Lewin. So, exclusive. We've got our sources.
Yeah, there has been a soft link with Calvert-Lewin. I think that would be a pretty good signing. And obviously, Everton may be still struggling slightly with PSR. Calvert-Lewin's got a lot of injury issues, but I think in terms of a striker who is a known entity and a good goal scorer in the Premier League who can do it, to be able to rotate him with someone like Muniz in game and also just week on week, I think would make a massive difference to the squad depth. It does, to me, say Vinny's definitely out the door. There's obviously been links with Mbabu being out the door as well, but I wonder how Jimenez sort of sits at that point, being on 100k a week and being your third striker. It maybe would push him out the door before the start of the season. Who knows? Next question, I'll throw to you first, Skibby. If you had to drop one of Robinson, Bassi, and Tete, as none of them are great on the ball under pressure, who would you reluctantly take the hit on? That one's from Cottage Tactico in the Discord. Oh, I think we've lost your sound there, Skibby. Dad, I'll throw to you while Skibby sorts that out.
Yeah, I'm dropping Mbabu.
Yeah, fair.
Oh, look, this would
Yeah,
cause me a lot of distress and
it's
pain, but it
we
probably
were
has
talking
to be
about this
Kenny.
beforehand. It's quite an easy one for me.
Go on. Sorry, I'll just cut Skibby's mic there. It's just popped in all of a sudden.
Go on, Skibby. Put your easy one in.
Nah, still not working. We got
How
a
about
massive
now?
lag there, it seems. Yeah, how about now? That's good.
There we go. Sorry, everything's gone wrong. There we go. Easy one for me. It has to be Tete. Robinson is very athletic. We just can't lose that aspect. Bassi for me is bullish. He's got pace. He can make up for mistakes. He's quite good at getting back. So for me, unfortunately, Tete just falls under the guillotine, unfortunately. But one thing I do want to touch upon Bassi though is definitely not a right centre back. Just
Yeah.
the way that he took a swing, missed the ball, let Fernandez in. So that was horrendous. So as long as Bassi's on the left, then yeah, it's Tete.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Dad.
Yeah, I already said very reluctantly because it would. I like seeing the guy out there. I love his energy, but technically and tactically, it would have to be Kenny.
Yeah, look, I'd agree with that. I think if we brought in a very good ball playing defender to sit alongside Bassi, and I think that makes the most sense. Bassi can easily put balls over the top for Robinson streaking down the left, and you put long balls in to Adama streaking down the right. So I think there's always an out there if you wanted it, but we do miss someone who's slightly better on the ball, and I think Kenny Tete probably does have to drop out at that point. Next question. This one is from at Mick Pez on Twitter. When can we expect some signings? Basically, we're heading for 0-3 start if we're waiting 2 weeks for deadline day. And do you believe Muniz is our starting striker? We've covered on that already, but would love to hear your thoughts. Also, a little comment, which I thought I'd leave in. Fantastic podcast. I listen every week from Australia up to Fulham. Guys, we sort of talked about it already, but I'll touch on the point here. Do you think if we waited all the way till deadline day to try and bring in those 3 players, that there is a potential for an 0-3 start?
No.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is
No one yet.
potential.
Good.
There is potential, and as I've said, but I do have some concerns that I think we're easily pressurized. That's what worries me at the moment at the back, and an opposition may not have that much of a goal threat. Sorry, yeah, that much of um, a goal threat, but we can be easily disheveled, and I think Marco Silva knows that. He commented on it. And so we're vulnerable. We need to get those guys in. All of the people we are expecting to come in ASAP. But that it's now commercial, It's not. It's no longer. It's no longer in line with what Marco wants. It's purely down to actually optimizing the transactions now. Surely.
Skibby?
I guess it's a two-parter. I'm not saying that I'd be happy if we don't sign any more players because I would be livid. But for sake of argument, we have the same squad that we have now. Do we lose the next 2 games? No. I think a midfield of Smith Rowe, Pereira, Lukic, even if you really wanted to be really negative, you could go Lukic and Reed, is still stronger against the newly promoted teams. And I think, yeah, we're going to be position filled matches, which, we're just going to try and unlock the door. I think Adama is potentially going to be that kind of player which can unlock the doors, as well as Smith Rowe. Smith Rowe had a really kind of baptism of fire, I found, against Man United. Lack of touches, got starved. That doesn't happen against Leicester and Ipswich. So I think for me, yeah, it's no chance that we're going 0-3. I think we actually have a decent Premier League squad as it stands, potentially finishing 14th, 15th. But, adding those players are the ones that are going to bring us to that top half, potentially Europe. I mean, I had some, like you said, there were some negative people already sort of talking about relegation. I saw someone call fans deluded, blah, 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 because they thought that we would get Europe. But if you're basing that off the Man United performance, where we're actually bringing in other faces as well, then I think that's just really pessimistic. I think we have a great foundation. I mean, if you look at the players that we have, that we're looking to replace, being Diop, potentially Lukic. Those players walk into an Ipswich team or a Leicester team. So I think we're in a position where we're actually a good foundation. But I think that's where we stand currently.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I just see. I think the fixtures actually line themselves up quite nicely where Leicester have to come to us. I think the first home game for Leicester would have been probably a different story where there's just that buzz in the crowd and, you can pull off results like that. And then with Ipswich, it's their second home game. They obviously lost their first home game of the season to Leicester. So you don't have that similar high that they had previously. And maybe we're actually potentially saved by that in a way that I feel like that can sometimes give teams a bit of an edge. And I think yeah, I can't see us being 0-3. I could see us maybe drawing one of those games, which would be disappointing. But like you said, Skibby, I think our squad is too deep to actually allow us to slip that badly against newly promoted sides. Final question. This one's from FPL Crusader on Twitter. Adama's quick but no end product. He created more than Wilson, but do we need another winger who can score 10 plus goals and also wear as our new 6? Skibby, throw to you first. New winger?
Yeah, no worries. Federico Chiesa's coming in. So I'm not worried about that one. But no, 100% we need a new winger. I think it goes back to that Iwobi piece that I mentioned earlier. I think he's a great sort of on the right mid maybe. But when we're really focusing on bringing Robinson into the game, we need to have a more Willian-esque type left winger. And I think that's what we're in the market for, if I'm honest. I would love us to get Chiesa, don't get me wrong. I'd be stupid to say no. But I can't see it happening personally. Do I think that Wesley is the person? I don't know. Untested in the Premier League. Great talent to have in the squad. But, 20 million for a player that is unproven in the Premier League, especially the physicality side of it, unsure. But no, I think definitely left wing with something about them is definitely something that we need. And where is the new 6? Apparently he's starting in the Copa Libertadores, but we'll see.
Fingers crossed he's left out of the squad for no apparent reason. Dad, your thoughts?
Well, as we always say, if Adama at Olympic, if he could make an Olympic 100-meter final, he could probably be in the weightlifting final as well. The fact that he doesn't finish like Messi is probably unrealistic. I still think, on balance, I'm happy to have the guy because I think he's just a great guy to have in the shed, if not starting. I would prefer something of higher quality on the left and the right. I actually prefer Wobie on the right. I don't like him on the left. And to touch on Wilson, I actually thought Harry Wilson looked okay when he came on. I thought he looked pretty sharp, he looked confident. I thought there was something there, and he was probably a bit unlucky not to start, but he hasn't featured in the last couple of weeks, so I think it wasn't a final minute decision on that. I think Silva wants to give Adama a go. I still think if we use him properly in games, he can still be a massive threat. Even if he can just progress the ball from within our half to the byline, get the ball in the area, and we've got 2 or 3 guys turning up, that's a chance every time,
Yeah.
And so, well, what's not to like about that? You can't have everything. He's, we shouldn't be under the illusion that he's the complete player. He's not, but he's got some very, very interesting skills, not unlike Robinson, right? So I like having the guy in the squad, and I like him being given a go to start, which he wasn't all of last season. Let's see what he can do. If we're at the end of, well, maybe 3 or 4 weeks from now, and he still isn't really delivering, fine, switch it up. Harry Wilson is definitely a decent cover for that, but I'd like something better. I really hope we end up with a really classy winger, hopefully to come in on the left and Iwobi on the right for me.
Yeah, I think his pros far outweigh his cons personally. like you said, his ability to get the ball upfield and then hand it off to someone else to do the the final ball stuff, especially when you've got a player like Smith Rowe there now and Pereira sitting a little bit deeper. Feels like there's more of an opportunity now for him to actually be able to play the ball off and for his ability to streak up the wing to actually be more of a benefit for us in the long run. So look,
Can I just
his
say on
final
that, Jack?
ball, yeah,
Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say
Carry
his
on.
final ball is not bad. It's not great, but we look at the cross that he put in for Menezes' bicycle kick against Sheffield. He's actually a bit of a goal scorer from out wide as well. I think he could always improve, but it's not terrible.
What I was going to say was I can't remember who it was against, but he made the big run and then actually played the ball along the ground in front of one of our players. Was that Everton, or am I just dreaming that?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
But I thought to myself, if we can actually kind of contain him to play a fairly easy ball in front of players progressing, maybe that's more realistic rather than expecting him to, run 60 or 70 meters at ridiculous pace and then smash one in at about sort of head height into the 6 yard box. I think that's asking too much. Maybe we ought to keep it a lot more simple than that. And particularly with if Smith Rowe and Mooney's are in that position, that's a more realistic goal threat.
Mm. Yeah, look, I think there's probably going to be some competition for him before the transfer window's over. I know we've talked about Silva saying that there's 3 signings incoming. I wouldn't be surprised if there's 3 permanent signings and then a couple of last minute loan deals, which we always look for. So I assume there'll be a bit of competition and a few more people to go out through the door as well before the season starts. So I'd say we don't necessarily need another winger, but I think extra squad depth and competition would be good for everyone involved. So I expect there'll be some movement there. Guys, I think we can probably wrap it up there. A really good review of the Man United game. Like we said a few times, disappointing, but there's a long way to go. Fortunately, it's the start of the season. We didn't get flogged by Man United, so it's definitely not one to feel too sorry for. Looking forward to getting back together during the week, hopefully, to actually preview the Leicester game, first game back at Craven Cottage for the season, and hopefully the first 3 points under our belt as well. Skibby, thank you for joining today.
No, thank you very much for having me. And bring on Leicester. I'm glad it's all back.
It's good to be back. Dad, thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you. And like you say, I'm just happy to be talking about real things rather than speculating. And actually, all the speculation in the transfer window, the next 2 weeks is when it actually all happens. I mean, there's a lot to happen. If Silver's saying there's definitely 3 players coming in and maybe a couple of loans, that's exciting. And we don't have to wait 8 or 10 weeks for it. It's all happening in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, just like Fergie time, this is Tony Khan time. It's the last couple of weeks of the window and Tony's pulling out the checkbook. So fingers crossed we have a bit of activity to talk about this time next week. Thank you to everyone who's joined in on the live stream. It's good to be back. Please do, as always, share this with other Fulham fans so they can find us. Please join the Discord, check out the website. And as always, come on, you Whites.